This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now. It was a nightmare.
Flight 807, you're clear for landing. Runway 7, Bravo.
All personnel report to the nearest tornado shelter. This is not a drill.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host Brian West, here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Now, as usual, I'll give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it first, followed by a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. And then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. So let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1. The local church community has been struggling, and COVID-19 may have put a dagger in some congregations, period. Now, when focusing on the foundation of any community, you will often find out that churches played a huge part in the makeup and nurturing of that community's members, the people, the residents, the businesses. Now, for some reason, over time, this key ingredient has been getting tainted, and the process of living a religious life has somehow fallen apart. Now, locally, a lot of churches have been failing, and they've been falling apart, and no one can figure out what happened over time in the field of religion. People probably just woke up. Now, and then after that, then came COVID-19, which literally has put a dagger into a lot of congregations. Now, 2 Campbell churches will be closing for good this year. The Catholic Diocese of Youngstown, St. Lucie Church, and St. Joseph the Provider Church. Now they will close November 28th of 2001. So that is not good news for the church community. Big headline I made it in this week. Story number 2. Election board member set to retire. The job of an election board member is not easy. And it's not as easy as it seems. Now, it takes work. To be on the board. One member will be stepping down. Mark Monroe has announced his retirement after a 30-year run on the election board locally. Now, Monroe did cite a lot of new advancements in the voting process in the article that talked about his retirement, but it did not say if this was the reason for him stepping down. Now, he will be replaced by Tom McCabe. Let's see how this works out. Tom McCabe is set to replace him, and we'll just see how it turns out. They say they've been having a lot of problems with voting, and that's why the story made it this week. Story number 3. First Energy is back in the headlines. In the aftermath of a scandal involving Larry Householder, First Energy is back in the news. But now the energy company is taking bigger steps, and they're trying to protect their customers, especially their passwords, etc. Now, after making national news, the company is now trying to clean up a mess that involved taxpayers and some key players in Ohio's political circles. Now, there are still sparks of news popping in and out of the headlines surrounding this story, and that's how it made it in this week. Big headline. That's why story number 3. Story number 4. Local drug overdose stories are still in the headlines. The local community has a problem with drugs. That's a fact. And drug overdose stories are staying in the headlines. The new talk in some circles is dealing with the fact that we have to deal with opioids and fentanyl. They call this the new heroin. Now, one conversation documented on NPR on an NPR talk show is implemented the science behind the drug matter. Now, some doctors are trying to say that we may have to live with drugs and the fact that it's around, and forgets about saying no. Trying to merge some trees that we're not supposed to be eating off of. That's That's not wise. Now, this is a worthy conversation to have, especially in a community on the front lines of the drug war. That community includes the Mahoning Valley, Trumbull County. Now, the truth is, in this story, is that a lot of people have been affected in the war on drugs, and that's in a bad way. So how could you merge that type of thinking and try to make it work in a world where people are just giving in and saying people are going to use drugs? So we're giving in. Some people are just giving in, saying that we have to live like this. This is a critical story in critical times, especially as drug overdoses continue to spike locally and across the United States. The Valley has reported a 44% increase in fatalities due to drug overdoses this year, and some doctors are thinking that we have to live with drugs. Big headlines. That's what story number 4 made it this week. Whew. Story number 5. Will reinforcements help Youngstown's crime problem? They're calling in reinforcements, calling in the feds. The mayor is sounding the alarm on crime, and he is doing so in the midst of his re-election campaign. Mayor Brown, Tito Brown, if you like it that way, has decided to bring in the federal government to assist with Youngstown's crime problems. That's bad. That's pretty bad when you got crime going that bad. You got to call in the feds. That's bad. Now, the main idea in this headline is that the mayor and police chief are trying to get a grip on the city's crime problem. The key word is trying. This is what the people of Youngstown will be observing in the next election when choosing the better candidate. Now, the stakes are high, and there will be a lot of facts pushed out when evaluating what is holding the city back from reaching its fullest potential, especially when dealing with crime. Big headline. That's why story number 5 made it in this week. Story number 6. Petty crime stories are seeping in and out of the headlines. It won't go anywhere. Youngstown officials, businesses, and residents have constantly had to pivot from business as usual because of crime problems. Now, how this story crept in is because it deals with the opportunity cost. That means you can't be at 2 places at one time. So when you're doing one thing, you could be losing out on doing something more productive. Now, if the city keeps having to pivot to combat crime, it's really doing the city a disservice, because every minute spent trying to combat crime is another minute lost trying to handle other important issues. Now, after yet another incident involving the stabbing of a city woman, this story is staying alive. And it's staying alive because people keep committing crimes. There was another killing in the city this week, and a stabbing of a woman. So these stories keep popping up, and obviously some people just are not getting the picture. And the question is why? Are they not aware? Do they not know? Or are they just so centered in on getting what they want out of a situation that they don't mind going to jail by taking somebody else's life? Who knows? And that's the mystery inside of story number 6. It almost made it to the top 2 this week. Story number 7 in the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Step right up. There's something smooth and really nice going on here. Something productive. Mediation. You can't beat it. $99 off this week, so you get a half price off, 1%. That means you're getting it almost for free, and you're only paying 1 cent on the dollar. All it takes is a click. Story number 7. Who's winning the local COVID-19 fight? It's been over a year now, and the data is showing that the fight is still on when it comes to COVID-19. What keeps fueling this story is the data, case numbers, and the damage brought on by shutdowns. In the shutdowns, now the state of the local economy, the job market, and social uprisings are all trending topics inside of this story. Now, this headline is also sparking up a lot of legal talk and how to keep this from ever happening again if it's not too late. The story is still developing. Story number 7. Who's winning the local COVID-19 fight? Some people have already lost. That's what's so sad about this story. Story number 8 in the top local headline and developing news story that made it this week. I'm gonna make a change. Oh, once in my life, it's gonna feel real. I'm gonna make a difference. Story number 8. What are the improvement plans for Youngstown? The change is gonna come when you come into a city and you notice a bumpy main road right at the entrance of the city. Then you have a problem. Headed into the next election, everyone at the table in Youngstown will be more focused on improvement plans than anything else. The key motivator in this story is that everyone seems to know what the problems are. They just have to implement the right improvement plans to fix them. Now, this week, an article made front page news citing the fact that Youngstown schools have to submit some improvement plans to the Ohio Department of Education that will be used by the department to determine whether the district is ready to move away from state control. Now, some board members have little faith in the plan. The key talking point in this story and why it's still developing is the fact that where there is improvement plans, there has to be a plan to implement those improvements. And the question is, does Youngstown have the right plans in place? And if they don't, who has those plans? Will the next mayoral elected candidate, or does the Mayor Tito Brown have the plans? Somebody has got to have a vision for the city. The Bible says that where there is no vision, the people perish. Amen. The gospel of mediation. Well, those are our top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. I'll be right back with the top 8 international headlines. Don't go anywhere. And news stories. You're the Mediator. Me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
Tune in and don't forget to subscribe to Method 8 Inc. YouTube channel. You can also watch free public entertainment. And don't forget to show some support by visiting www.method8inc.com by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something. You can also sponsor a program as well. That's www.method8inc.com. Buy stuff, watch stuff, or read stuff.
Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. If you have nothing else better to do with your time, you can't go wrong with a little taste of mediation. There's so much packed in one program, so much information that you can't lose, baby. It's a win-win situation. It's balanced. It's everything. It's the Mediator, baby. Spicy. Let's get to it. Story number 1. How the state of Texas is keeping some hot issues alive. Hot topics, baby. Ooh. Abortion is bad. It is rooted in a process to eliminate a certain class of people, and those who are aware of this have been fighting for years to put an end to its mass genocidal effects. Genocide, killing, innocents. At the moment, Texas is leading the way in the still trending topic. And what many feel is a righteous topic and a righteous issue. Story number 2. If you don't show up to work, I think a robot will. Trust me, that's what's happening. A robot is showing up and doing somebody else's job. COVID-19 not only hit the job market hard, but it has catapulted the artificial intelligence business back in the news. Now, if you look at tech companies' financial statements, the majority of them stayed in the black during the process or during the crisis, when all this stuff was taking place, the lockdowns. Somehow, some way, a lot of tech companies stayed in the black. That means they made a profit while everybody else was losing money. Technology has changed the way people do work, period. Now, a huge factor keeping this story alive is the simple fact that if you don't show up to work, a robot most likely will be doing whatever its owner programs or pays the programmer to have it do. Now, if this keeps up, this will be another big headline to look after. So you have abortion, then you have robots taking over your job. So are we eliminating ourselves, the human race, the human species? We're on drugs, we're doing everything but what they say expected of us to do. We are some sad creatures right now, and I'm sure all the animals are sitting and waiting and licking their chops to see who's next in line if we don't get our act together. And that's why story number 2 made it this week. We gotta show, we gotta start striving for greatness if we haven't already achieved too much. And that's why story number 2 made it this week, folks. Story number 3. Don't get distracted. America still has a border problem. We can wish, hope, and pray, but the border problems are still here. There's still a lot of attention tied to this problem, and a lot of people do not know how serious this issue really actually is unless they go down there or actually keep an eye on some stories that are connected to this story. Now, migrant caravan busts are not only still in the headlines, but what is keeping the story alive is the question of what works and doesn't work. At the time, nobody knows what. Now, another question is if and how the Biden administration will deal with border problems, and what has become of this pendulum swinging back to the right. So for a minute there, everybody was kind of siding with the Biden administration. Now they're like, what is going to actually happen? Do you actually have a plan? Does Kamala have a plan? Does anybody have a plan to deal with this problem, this growing problem? Now, some people are throwing in the towel when it comes to humanitarian issues and siding with what they feel is the most solid and unsympathetic solution, which is putting a stop to it somehow, sending people back and just giving them if they're breaking the law, just giving them the boot. Now, the pendulum is really shifting in this headline, and this story is staying. Story number 4. Why is the energy war so dangerous? There are a few schools of thoughts that are colliding when it comes to the energy debate, and energy policies are what's keeping these stories alive. Keeping up with the energy business and the footprints of how the world evolved electronically over time is a very critical story that has two sectors of thoughts colliding. It means that there's two sides to the story. There's probably more. Now, this story takes some critical thinking because it appears that you cannot have one without the other. That means you can't have energy without energy. You can't have fossil fuels without electric energy because one has to boost and generate the other. Now, unless you have people running on bicycles, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. Now, the energy war is dangerous because the science behind this entire process has led people to actually believe that electricity will save us from not only climate change, but pollution and other environmental concerns, when it might actually make things worse. Now, climate activists seem to be debating about this issue, but the reality in this story seems to be based on the real fact that eliminating the use of fossil fuels could really be uncomfortable in the long run. So story number 4, I don't see leaving the news anytime soon. Why is the energy war so dangerous? Big question. Well, those are our top 4 stories that made it this week international. I'll be right back with the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories. So don't go anywhere. You're in the media with me, Brian West. I'll be right back. If you want to check out the stories that almost made it in or did make it in, go to our Twitter feed on our website. Check out everything. All of the sources are there. And go to the website. It's method8inc.com. Method8inc.com, where you can buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Folks, there is nothing better than being informed. We just had the 9/11 anniversary pass, and in hopes that something like that will never happen again, my present to you every week is to keep you informed on the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Ooh, whew, I'm doing something special. This is a present for you. You don't have to do anything but tune in. That's a good deal. And if you want to help out, it's up to you. But you don't have to. But I'm here for you. Come on, I'm hugging you. Ooh, I got you. I got you, girl. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Let's get to it. Story number 5. Is terrorism still a top concern? And if not, what is? Let's hope that we never see what happened in 9/11. Again, every year analysts focus on central threats. During 9/11, terrorism was a top concern. Now, what has people rattled now is the simple fact that a story does not become a top story until something happens that catapults that story into the top headlines. Terrorism is still a top concern, folks, but what's trending now is the continued civil battle between liberals and conservatives, which doesn't seem to be ending. Now, inside of this still trending headline and topic is how this one conversation, these conversations, if you want to be exact, between liberals and conservatives seem to be eating away and proving about how polarized we actually are and how polarization has rooted itself in the fabric of everyday life in America right now. Now, this story in itself is sparking so many divisive conflicts that it's ridiculous and getting some people hurt. Now, some people are deciding to sit safely in the middle of an ongoing far right and what appears to be far left craziness. Some people are just sitting in the middle of all this craziness and trying to mediate. Now, it's pretty hard to find common ground with two opposite ends, but somehow, some way, we have to make it work, and that's why story number 5 made it in this week. Story number 6. Some hospitals have survived through COVID-19, but many are barely hanging on. Here is a list of situations that still have hospitals on the radar in the madness called COVID-19. Lack of preparedness, lack of PPE, lack of help, and other nagging issues like COVID-19 fatigue. Workers are just tired. Some hospitals have gone to the extent of not allowing their workers to discuss the business of their hospital with the public without some form of disciplinary action. COVID-19 has exposed a lot of unknown business matters of how hospitals work that weren't known before. Now, it has even exposed a lot of inner dealings when focusing on some very sensitive information connecting high-level medical officials to an internally connected global medical system. That means somehow, some way, America got linked with other countries and somehow could have created a disease that could have been prevented. So this is what's trending in some stories, and once those stories hit mainstream, they don't leave people's imaginations. Now, the more investigations probing the dealings of Dr. Fauci, the more the public becomes very, very critical of their medical care professionals and medical care, period. Trust has a lot to do with how this story made it in and how this story is still developing. So keep an eye on story number 6. Big headline. Story number 7 in the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made it in this week. It's 2, baby. Top 2. Whoo, we got to the top. Woo, wee. Ooh, ooh, yeah. Don't you feel it? The future when dealing with inflation is a primetime story. And that's story number 7. How do you pay for what you cannot afford? You have to put it back. Inflation is becoming a primetime story because costs are rising. And when costs rise, people have to earn enough to help pay for what they cannot afford. Channeling money in the right place is what has this story buzzing because investors are concerned. This story is the root of how corrupt situations evolve over time because some people will rob and steal from those who they sense to be greedy or they feel are greedy. People will rob and steal even when they can't eat. They will try to take from the people with the money. This is a fact. Inflation is real, folks, and the fact that it's creating just 2 classes of society, that's also a fact. At the moment, you may only have just the rich and the poor, and no middle class. This is becoming a really, really big problem, and that's why story number 7 is a primetime story. You could have only written about this years ago, but now it could be becoming a reality. We've got to get it together. We've got to get back to the middle, where it's safe, mediation, the middle class. That's what this show was created for. The working man. I feel special. Story number 8 in the top international headline and developing news story that made it this week. Hate it or love it, is the top story. Congress has had to make some critical decisions in the past 4 years. This is a big, big headline. The debt ceiling is just another issue now on the minds of congressional officials. Congress has 1 month to decide if they want to raise the debt ceiling to pay the bills. Now, in the past 4 years, Washington, D.C. has had to face riots, protests on city streets, and some even on the Capitol grounds. Now, these are continued ongoing threats at the Capitol and a long list of other social issues and stuff that comes along with dealing with freedom and justice for all. Now, the federal government has been leaking cash because of COVID-19, and nature has not made it any better. The nature has been, we just have the Hurricane Ida come through, and nature has not made it any better. The more money, it's got to come from somewhere. Now, foreign and domestic affairs alone are still primetime issues, and there are so many more threats still emerging daily. What got this story in is not only because of the growing threats of partisanship, but the concern now is if Joe Biden has what it takes to make the critical decisions that will leave America better off in the future. So that's why story number 8 is such a big, big headline. Congress has had to make some very, very critical decisions when it's all in the rule book. It's all said and done. We've all seen the federal government come to the rescue day by day. We've all seen bills get passed. We've seen the debt ceiling get raised over and over again. But story number 8 lingers on, folks. And that's why I made it to the top this week. Well, those are our top 8 international and local headlines and developing news stories that I made it this week. I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of doing the research. As usual, I'd like to thank all the news outlets, the journalists, the people on the front lines, the media. You deserve all the credit. I'm just the man in the middle, the mediator. If you want to show some support, it does not take much. All you have to do is visit the website on the screen, buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back next week looking through over 200 or more stories just to keep you informed. That's always the goal. Thank you for tuning to I got it. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator. Got to stay fresh this week. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator this week with me, Brian West. Have a good week, everybody. Peace.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is